Millions of people can have their mood changed by a game they never played. A late goal feels like victory. A bad call feels personal. A loss can ruin the evening. And then there are people who can sit in the same room, watch the same moment, and feel almost nothing. This is the psychology of people who don't obsess over sports. But the interesting question is not whether they are less competitive, less social, or somehow wired better. It is why a team never becomes part of their identity in the first place. That distinction changes everything. Start with the word we. Sports fans rarely say, "the team won." They say, "we won." Psychologists study this through team identification and social identity. When identification becomes strong, the team is no longer just entertainment. It becomes part of the way a person defines themselves. That can make a result feel surprisingly personal. Classic research on sports fandom described basking in reflected glory. After a victory, people are more willing to associate themselves visibly with the successful group. Later research has also shown the opposite move after failure, psychologically distancing from a losing team. That does not mean sports fans are irrational. It means identity changes the emotional stakes. If your team represents your city, your family, your childhood, your friends, or even your relationship with a parent, the scoreboard is attached to something much larger than the scoreboard. Now look at the non-fan. The person who does not care about sports may understand every rule and still never experience that identity link. The key sentence never forms. This is my team. And without that sentence, "we won" sounds strange. This is where many popular psychology videos go too far. They say non-fans have lower tribal instincts, more stable self-esteem, different dopamine genes, or brains that simply reject vicarious competition. The evidence does not justify claims that strong. We have good research on sports fans and team identification. We have far less evidence showing that people who dislike sports form one distinct psychological type. So the safer conclusion is also the more interesting one. Non-fans may not lack tribal psychology. Their tribes may simply be somewhere else. Music scenes, political movements, professions, gaming communities, cars, art, religion, investing, technology, a favorite creator, a local community. Human beings can build identity around almost anything. Sports just happens to make that identity extremely visible. A stadium gives you colors, symbols, chants, rivals, traditions, and thousands of people reacting at the same time. That is powerful social architecture, and it can be genuinely good for people. Research on highly identified sports fans has linked fan communities with belonging, social support, and some measures of psychological well-being. That matters because it destroys another lazy stereotype. Sports obsession is not automatically stupid. For many people, fandom is friendship with a schedule. The game gives people a reason to meet. A father calls his son. Friends gather every Sunday. Strangers become temporary allies because they are wearing the same shirt. If you do not care about sports, you may simply get that social reward somewhere else. Psychology of people who don't obsess over sports. Brain imaging research on committed fans has found that team-related information can engage regions involved in reward and emotion, and that the pattern varies with fan identity. Notice what that does not prove. It does not prove that non-fans have defective reward systems. It does not prove sports are neurologically equivalent to gambling. And it definitely does not prove your indifference to football is written in one dopamine gene. It shows something simpler. What you identify with changes what your brain treats as meaningful. That is the real divide. A sports fan sees a final in the last minute. A non-fan may see 22 strangers chasing an outcome that will not change Monday morning. Neither perception is complete. The fan sees history, rivalry, memory, status, uncertainty, and community. The non-fan sees the distance between the spectacle and their own life. Now here is the strongest point. People who do not obsess over sports are not necessarily less tribal. They may be less fused with this particular tribe. That difference matters because team identification exists on a spectrum. Some fans enjoy a game and move on. Others experience the team as a major part of self. Recent research on sports fandom even uses the idea of identity fusion to explain the most intense forms of loyalty, where personal identity and group identity become unusually close. If that fusion never happens, the emotional intensity can look bizarre from the outside. If this distinction sounds familiar, subscribe. This short psychology series is about ordinary behaviors that look simple until you examine what identity is doing underneath them. And tell me in the comments, do sports feel emotionally meaningless to you, or is there one team, player, or event that somehow breaks the rule? You hear someone say, "We got robbed," and you think you were sitting on a couch. But reverse the situation. Maybe you have spent hours arguing about a political issue, a stock, a musician, a game, a car brand, or a piece of technology. Someone outside that world might look at you exactly the same way. That is the uncomfortable twist. The psychology of people who don't obsess over sports may reveal less about sports than it reveals about identity itself. We all have things that become psychologically larger than their practical consequences. The question is where yours are. For the non-sports fan, the championship may simply never cross that threshold. There is no emotional inheritance from a parent. No local team that became part of childhood. No friend group built around game day. No pleasure in tracking statistics. No story strong enough to convert they into we. So the event remains what it literally is, a game, and that can create a strange social position. Sports often functions as social shorthand. "Did you see the game?" is not always a request for analysis. Sometimes it is an invitation to belong. A non-fan who says, "No, I don't follow sports," may accidentally decline the invitation as well as the topic. That can make sports indifference feel more socially unusual than it actually is. But there is no psychological requirement to care. You can get belonging without a team, competition without spectatorship, narrative without a season, excitement without a scoreboard, and identity without a jersey. So here is the final reframe. If you do not obsess over sports, you are not necessarily more independent, more intelligent, less tribal, or more emotionally stable. You may simply have never attached your identity to that particular game. And if you are a passionate fan, you are not automatically manipulated, addicted, or irrational. You may be experiencing one of the oldest human pleasures in a modern form, shared identity. The healthy question for both groups is the same. Can you enjoy what you care about without letting it control how you treat people who care about something else? That is bigger than sports. If this describes you, subscribe for the next psychology profile. The crowd can keep the scoreboard. You still get to decide what counts as a win.